Have you ever noticed that most people spend their lives waiting? Waiting for graduation, waiting for a better job, waiting for a promotion, waiting until they earn enough money, waiting for retirement, waiting for the perfect moment to finally start living. But what if that perfect moment never arrives? Imagine waking up every morning without feeling trapped by an alarm clock. Imagine choosing where you work, when you work, and even whether you work that day at all. Imagine earning money while spending time with your family, traveling through mountains, reading books on a beach, or learning a skill you've always wanted to master. It sounds like a fantasy. But according to entrepreneur and best-selling author Tim Ferriss, this kind of life isn't reserved for billionaires or celebrities. It's possible for ordinary people who are willing to stop following the default path and start questioning the rules they've accepted without thinking. Welcome to Volume and Vision. If you're someone who dreams of financial freedom, wants more control over your time, or simply feels exhausted by the endless cycle of working harder without feeling happier, then stay with me. Because today, we're exploring one of the most influential books ever written about designing a different kind of life, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. This is not a book about becoming lazy. It's not about avoiding work. And despite its title, it's not literally about working only 4 hours every single week. Instead, it's about something much more valuable. Freedom. Freedom to choose how you spend your time. Freedom to decide where you live. Freedom to build income that isn't completely tied to your daily effort. Freedom to stop postponing life until someday. Over the next few minutes, you'll discover why most people stay trapped in careers they don't enjoy, why working longer hours rarely creates a better life, and how changing just a few ways of thinking can completely transform your future. But before we begin, here's one question I'd like you to keep in the back of your mind. If money were no longer your biggest concern, how would you spend tomorrow? Think about it carefully. Would you still wake up at the same time? Would you still do the same job? Would you still spend 8 or 10 hours in front of a computer? Or would your life look completely different? Most people never ask themselves these questions because they're too busy surviving. And that's exactly where the problem begins. From childhood, we're given a roadmap. Study hard, get good grades, find a stable job, work for 40 years, save money, retire, then finally enjoy life. Generation after generation has followed this script so faithfully that very few people ever stop to question whether it's actually the best way to live. What if there's another way? What if success isn't measured by how busy you are? What if wealth isn't just about how much money sits in your bank account? What if the richest person in the room is actually the one who owns the most valuable resource of all, time? This idea changed Tim Ferriss's life. And it might change yours too. Before writing this book, Tim wasn't living the dream. He wasn't relaxing on tropical beaches. He wasn't traveling the world. He wasn't working only a few hours each week. Instead, he was trapped in a routine that many people know all too well. Long workdays, constant stress, endless emails, growing responsibilities, little free time. His business was making money, but instead of owning his business owned him. He had built a prison with invisible walls. The strange part, from the outside, everything looked successful. Good income, growing company, respect, achievement. But internally, he felt exhausted. This is one of the biggest illusions of modern life. People often confuse success with freedom. Someone earning a huge salary might actually have less freedom than someone earning half as much. Why? Because if your lifestyle depends on working every single day just to maintain it, then you're not truly free. Imagine two people. The first earns 2 million rupees every year but works 12 hours every day. The second earns 1 million rupees, works only 3 hours a day, and spends the rest of the time traveling, reading, exercising, building relationships, and learning new skills. Who is richer? Most people immediately choose the first person because of the larger income. But Tim argues that the second person may actually be wealthier. Because wealth isn't only measured in money. It's measured in choices. If you have money but no time, you've purchased comfort while sacrificing life itself. Money can always be earned again. Time never returns. Think about your own week. How many hours disappear without you even realizing it? Commuting, scrolling endlessly through social media, attending meetings that accomplish almost nothing, answering emails that could have waited. doing tasks simply because they've always been done that way. Now imagine recovering just 2 or 3 of those hours every single day. That's nearly 1,000 extra hours every year. Enough time to learn a new language, start a business, read dozens of books, master a valuable skill, travel, exercise consistently, or simply spend meaningful time with people you love. The question isn't whether you have enough time. The question is whether you're spending it intentionally. This brings us to one of the most powerful ideas in the entire book. Most people are trying to become rich, but very few people stop to ask why. If you ask someone why they want more money, they'll usually answer with something like this. I want to travel. I want freedom. I want to spend more time with my family. I want less stress. I want to do work that matters. Notice something interesting. None of those answers are actually about money. Money is simply the tool. Freedom is the real goal. The tragedy is that millions of people spend their entire lives chasing the tool while forgetting the reason they wanted it in the first place. Imagine climbing a ladder for 30 years only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. That's exactly what happens to many successful professionals. They achieve everything society told them to chase. A good salary, a respectable title, a beautiful house, a nice car. Yet deep inside, they still feel empty. Because they never stopped to ask one simple question. What kind of life am I actually trying to build? This question changes everything. Instead of asking, how can I earn more money? Tim encourages us to ask, how can I create more freedom? Instead of asking, how can I become busier? Ask, how can I become more effective? Those two questions sound similar, but they lead to completely different lives. Our culture often celebrates busyness. People proudly say things like, I've been working all weekend. I only slept 4 hours. I'm so busy, as if exhaustion has become a symbol of importance. But being busy doesn't necessarily mean being productive. Imagine 2 workers. One spends 12 hours answering emails, attending meetings, and completing dozens of tiny tasks. The other spends 3 focused hours solving one important problem that generates enormous value. Who accomplished more? The answer is obvious. Activity and achievement are not the same thing. Movement and progress are not the same thing. Being occupied and creating results are not the same thing. Yet many of us confuse them every single day. Tim introduces a completely different mindset. Rather than measuring success by hours worked, measure it by meaningful outcomes. A single hour of focused work can sometimes outperform an entire day filled with distractions. This sounds simple, but very few people actually live this way. Because from childhood, we've been rewarded for effort more than effectiveness. Students receive praise for studying all night. Employees receive recognition for staying late. Managers admire people who never leave the office. Meanwhile, the person who quietly finishes excellent work in half the time often goes unnoticed. The system rewards appearances. This book encourages us to reward results. That shift in thinking is where true freedom begins. And once you begin questioning these assumptions, you'll notice something fascinating. Almost every rule you've accepted about work, success, and money deserves another look. Because sometimes the biggest obstacle standing between you and an extraordinary life isn't a lack of intelligence. It isn't a lack of opportunity. It isn't even a lack of money. It's the invisible beliefs you've never thought to question. Think about the last truly busy day you had. You probably woke up early, rushed through breakfast, checked your phone before even getting out of bed, answered messages during breakfast, attended meetings, replied to emails, completed dozens of small tasks, came home exhausted, and collapsed into bed feeling as if you had accomplished a lot. Now ask yourself one uncomfortable question. If you repeated that exact day for the next 10 years, would your life become dramatically better? For many people, the honest answer is no. They're working incredibly hard, but they're running on a treadmill. Every step requires effort, yet they remain in almost the same place. This is exactly the trap Tim Ferriss wants us to escape. He introduces a simple framework that acts like a roadmap for building a life with more freedom. He calls it the DEAL framework. Each letter represents one stage of transforming the way you work and live. The first step is definition. The second is elimination. The third is automation. And the final step is liberation. At first glance, these words may sound like business terminology, but together they describe a completely different philosophy. Let's begin with the first and perhaps the most overlooked step: definition. Most people never clearly define what success means to them. Instead, they borrow someone else's definition. Parents have one idea of success. Friends have another. Society has another. Social media creates yet another version, where success is measured by luxury cars, expensive watches, and photographs taken in exotic locations. The result: people spend years chasing dreams they never actually wanted. Imagine entering a marathon without knowing where the finish line is. No matter how fast you run, you'll never feel satisfied because you don't know what you're running toward. That's how many people live. They're constantly moving but rarely questioning their direction. Tim challenges us to stop measuring ourselves against everyone else. Instead of asking, "What should I want?" ask, "What genuinely excites me?" There's a huge difference. One question comes from society. The other comes from you. Take a moment and think about your own ambitions. If nobody judged your choices, if nobody compared you with your classmates, if money wasn't the only factor, what kind of life would you choose? Would you still live in the same city? Would you still pursue the same career? Would you still spend your weekends the same way? These questions aren't meant to make you abandon your responsibilities overnight. They're meant to help you discover whether the path you're following is actually leading toward the life you want. Because climbing faster doesn't help if you're climbing the wrong mountain. One of the most refreshing ideas in this book is that extraordinary lives aren't built by collecting expensive things. They're built by collecting meaningful experiences. Think back to your happiest memories. Chances are they weren't created by owning a new phone or buying another gadget. Maybe it was a road trip with friends, a conversation that changed your perspective, learning a new skill, watching a sunrise after a long hike, helping someone who genuinely needed you, or achieving something you once thought was impossible. The moments that shape our lives usually come from experiences, not possessions. Yet society constantly encourages us to buy more instead of living more. We're told that happiness is just one purchase away: a bigger house, a newer car, a more expensive watch, another promotion, another raise, another upgrade. But have you ever noticed that the excitement from buying something new fades surprisingly fast? What felt extraordinary on the first day becomes ordinary within weeks. Psychologists call this adaptation. Humans quickly get used to improvements, which means lasting happiness rarely comes from constantly upgrading our possessions. Tim argues that instead of endlessly increasing your lifestyle costs, increase the quality of your experiences. Experiences expand who you are. Possessions often become things you have to maintain. This doesn't mean money isn't important. It absolutely is. Money creates options. It reduces stress. It provides security. But beyond a certain point, more money without more freedom doesn't necessarily create a better life. Imagine earning twice your current salary. Now imagine working twice as many hours to earn it. Would you actually feel wealthier? Or would you simply have less time to enjoy what you've earned? This brings us to another fascinating idea. Many people confuse income with wealth. Income is the money coming in. Wealth is the amount of freedom that money gives you. Someone earning a modest income while controlling their schedule may actually enjoy a richer life than someone earning millions but trapped inside endless responsibilities. Freedom isn't determined only by what you earn. It's determined by what your earnings allow you to do. That's why defining success matters so much. If your definition of success is simply more money, you'll probably never reach the finish line because there will always be someone richer. But if your definition is spending meaningful time with loved ones, building work you enjoy, maintaining your health, and having enough financial security to make your own choices, then success suddenly becomes much more realistic and much more fulfilling. Another powerful exercise Tim encourages is imagining your ideal day instead of your ideal salary. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture yourself waking up 5 years from now. Where are you? What time do you wake up? What kind of room surrounds you? Do you hear city traffic or birds outside your window? What work do you do? Who do you spend your afternoons with? What excites you enough to jump out of bed? This exercise may seem simple, but it reveals something profound. Most people know exactly how much they want to earn. Very few know how they actually want to live. Without that clarity, money becomes an endless chase instead of a meaningful tool. Once you've defined the life you want, another surprising question appears. What's actually stopping you? Most people immediately answer, I need more money. I need more experience. I need the right opportunity. I need better timing. Sometimes those reasons are valid. But often, the biggest obstacle is fear. Fear wears many disguises. Fear of failure. Fear of criticism. Fear of disappointing family. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of making the wrong decision. Fear of leaving something familiar. Ironically, many people fear change more than they fear remaining unhappy. They stay in jobs they dislike because those jobs are predictable. They postpone dreams because uncertainty feels dangerous. But here's something worth thinking about. Every major achievement in history looked risky before it became obvious. Starting a business was risky. Writing a book was risky. Changing careers was risky. Moving to another country was risky. Even falling in love is risky. If we waited until every decision felt perfectly safe, we'd never grow at all. Tim doesn't suggest becoming reckless. He suggests becoming honest. Instead of asking, what if everything goes wrong? Also ask, what if everything goes right? Imagine looking back 10 years from now. Which regret would hurt more? Trying something ambitious and failing, or never trying because fear convinced you to stay exactly where you were? For many people, failure isn't what destroys dreams. Indecision does. There's another interesting truth about fear. Most fears become smaller the moment we examine them carefully. Suppose you're thinking about launching a side business. Your mind immediately says, what if nobody buys? What if I lose money? What if people laugh at me? Now challenge each fear. If nobody buys, what happens? You improve the product. If you lose some money, you learn an expensive lesson that could save you much bigger losses later. If people laugh, most of them will forget about it within days because they're too busy thinking about their own lives. Suddenly the nightmare doesn't seem so terrifying. The unknown often appears much larger than it actually is. Our imagination tends to exaggerate worst-case scenarios while completely ignoring the best possible outcomes. That's why Tim encourages replacing vague fears with specific questions. Specific questions produce practical answers. Vague fears produce endless anxiety. Definition isn't only about discovering what you want. It's also about identifying the invisible beliefs that keep you from pursuing it. Once you've done that, you're ready for the next transformation. Because knowing what matters is powerful. But removing everything that doesn't matter is where your life truly begins to change. Now comes the turning point. This is where most people expect to hear another speech about working harder, waking up at 5 in the morning, or filling every minute of the day with productivity hacks. Instead, Tim Ferriss makes a bold claim. The fastest way to get more done is not by adding more work. It's by removing unnecessary work. At first, that sounds almost too simple. After all, we've spent our entire lives believing that success comes from doing more. More meetings, more projects, more responsibilities, more hours, more effort. But think about this. Imagine you're carrying a backpack filled with heavy stones. Someone tells you they'll help you walk faster by giving you stronger shoes. That might help a little. But wouldn't it make more sense to first remove the unnecessary weight? That's exactly what elimination is about. Before improving your productivity, eliminate the things that are stealing it. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that every task on their to-do list deserves equal attention. It doesn't. Some tasks create enormous value. Others simply create the illusion of progress. Imagine spending an entire day organizing files on your computer, replying to every email within 5 minutes, color-coding your calendar, and attending meetings where nothing important is decided. At the end of the day, you've been busy from morning until evening. But what meaningful result did you actually create? Probably very little. Now imagine another person. They spend the first hour identifying the single most important task that could move their career, business, or life forward. Then they work on that task without interruptions. After finishing it, they handle only the remaining essential responsibilities. They may appear less busy, but their results are dramatically better. This is the difference between activity and effectiveness. One creates motion, the other creates momentum, and momentum changes lives. To explain this idea, Tim introduces one of the most famous principles in productivity, the 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle. The concept is surprisingly simple. In many areas of life, 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts. That doesn't mean the numbers are always exact. The message is that a small number of actions usually produce the majority of meaningful outcomes. Think about your own life. You probably have dozens of contacts saved on your phone. But how many of those people truly enrich your life? Maybe 5, maybe 10. You may own hundreds of pieces of clothing. Yet you probably wear the same few outfits most of the time. A business may sell dozens of products, but only a handful generate most of its profits. A student may study 10 different topics, but a few key concepts often determine most of the exam score. The pattern appears everywhere. The challenge is recognizing which 20% actually matters. Imagine you're running a small online business. You have 100 customers. After analyzing your sales, you discover that just 20 of those customers generate almost 80% of your income. Would it make sense to treat every customer exactly the same? Probably not. You'd naturally invest more time serving the people who contribute the most value. The same principle applies to your daily schedule. Look at everything you did yesterday. Which activities genuinely moved your life forward? Maybe exercising, learning a valuable skill, writing, building your business, spending quality time with family. Now think about everything else. How much time disappeared into mindless scrolling, checking notifications, watching random videos, jumping between tasks without finishing any, answering messages that weren't urgent, refreshing your inbox every few minutes. These tiny interruptions seem harmless, but together they quietly consume hours every single week. One interruption doesn't destroy productivity. Hundreds of interruptions do. Imagine trying to read your favorite book while someone taps your shoulder every 2 minutes. Even if each interruption lasts only a few seconds, your concentration never fully returns. The same thing happens when we constantly switch between tasks. Our brain needs time to regain focus. Every distraction carries a hidden cost. This is why highly successful people often protect their attention more carefully than their money. Because attention creates everything else. Another principle Tim discusses complements the 80-20th rule perfectly. It's called Parkinson's law. The idea is almost amusing because we've all experienced it. Work expands to fill the amount of time available. Suppose your teacher gives you 1 month to complete an assignment. What usually happens? For the first week, you think about starting. The second week, you gather information. The third week, you tell yourself there's still plenty of time. Then suddenly, 2 days before the deadline, you finish the entire project in one focused burst. Now imagine receiving the exact same assignment with a deadline of 48 hours. Would it still take a month? Probably not. You would immediately ignore unnecessary details, focus on what truly matters, and complete it much faster. The task itself didn't change. Only the available time changed. This happens in offices every day. A meeting scheduled for 1 hour somehow lasts exactly 1 hour. The same discussion, if limited to 15 minutes, often reaches the same conclusion. Give yourself unlimited time, and your brain will unconsciously invent extra work. Give yourself a meaningful deadline, and your brain becomes remarkably efficient. That's why Tim recommends creating shorter deadlines for yourself instead of waiting for external pressure. Urgency forces clarity. Without urgency, perfectionism often takes over. And perfectionism can be one of the most dangerous forms of procrastination. Many people don't delay because they're lazy. They delay because they want everything to be perfect. The perfect business idea, the perfect website, the perfect logo, the perfect plan, the perfect timing. Weeks become months, months become years. Nothing gets launched, nothing gets created, nothing changes. Imagine an artist who spends 10 years painting a masterpiece but never shows it to the world because one corner still isn't perfect. Compare that with another artist who creates, improves, shares, learns from feedback, and creates again. Who grows faster? Almost always, it's the second person. Progress beats perfection, every single time. Another hidden enemy of productivity is the obsession with feeling busy. People often mistake a full calendar for an important life. But a packed schedule doesn't necessarily mean you're making meaningful progress. Sometimes it simply means you've become good at saying yes to everything. Every invitation, every meeting, every request, every favor, every opportunity. The problem is that every time you say yes to something unnecessary, you're quietly saying no to something that truly matters. No one can give 100% attention to 100 different priorities. Eventually, everything becomes average. Learning to say no is uncomfortable, especially if you want people to like you. But every successful person eventually discovers the same truth. If you don't decide what deserves your time, someone else will. And they'll happily fill your calendar with their priorities instead of yours. This doesn't mean becoming selfish. It means becoming intentional. Imagine your time as a jar. Inside that jar are a few large stones, some smaller pebbles, and thousands of grains of sand. The large stones represent your biggest priorities. Your health, your family, your dreams, your meaningful work. The pebbles represent responsibilities. The sand represents endless distractions. If you pour the sand into the jar first, there's no room left for the important things. But if you place the large stones in first, everything else naturally fits around them. Life works exactly the same way. Your biggest priorities deserve your best energy, not the leftovers after every distraction has taken its share. Tim encourages readers to regularly ask a surprisingly powerful question. If this were the only thing I accomplished today, would I feel satisfied? Think about that. Just one task, not 20. 1. Because often there's one activity that matters more than everything else combined. Identify it, protect it, finish it, then move on. This mindset can completely transform the way you work. Instead of waking up and reacting to whatever demands your attention first, you begin leading your day instead of chasing it. You become less busy, but far more effective. And once you've mastered eliminating unnecessary work, something remarkable happens. You begin realizing that even many of your necessary tasks don't actually require you to do them personally. Some can be delegated, others can be automated, some can disappear entirely, and that's where the next stage of the journey begins. Not by working harder, but by building systems that continue working even when you aren't. Imagine this. You're sitting in your favorite cafe on a quiet morning. A cup of coffee rests beside your laptop. Outside the window, people are rushing to work, checking their watches, answering phone calls, and worrying about deadlines. Meanwhile, your phone vibrates. A customer has purchased your digital product. A payment has been received. An automated email has already welcomed the customer. The product has already been delivered. Your accounting software has already recorded the sale. You didn't touch your computer. You didn't answer a phone call. You didn't even know the sale was happening until the notification appeared. For most people, this sounds unbelievable. Because we're taught one powerful belief from childhood. If you're not working, you shouldn't be earning. Tim Ferriss challenges that belief completely. He asks a simple but life-changing question. Why should your income always depend on your physical presence? Think about the difference between a traditional job and a movie. An employee gets paid once for every hour worked. A filmmaker spends months creating one movie. After it's released, millions of people can watch it without the filmmaker being present every single time. The effort happened once. The value continues. This is one of the biggest mindset shifts in the entire book. Stop thinking only about earning money. Start thinking about building systems that continue creating value. That's the real purpose of automation. When people hear the word automation, they often imagine robots replacing humans or expensive software handling giant companies. But automation is much simpler than that. It's about creating processes that reduce unnecessary involvement. Imagine a bakery. If the owner personally bakes every loaf of bread, serves every customer, cleans every table, manages the accounts, orders ingredients, and handles marketing, the business can never grow beyond that one person's energy. Now imagine another bakery. Recipes are documented. Employees know exactly what to do. Supplies arrive automatically on schedule. Payments are processed digitally. Inventory updates itself. Customer feedback is collected automatically. The owner is still important. But the business no longer stops every time the owner takes a day off. That's the difference between owning a job and owning a system. Many people unknowingly create jobs for themselves instead of businesses. They're constantly busy, but if they disappear for 2 weeks, everything comes to a halt. Tim argues that true freedom begins when your work becomes independent of your constant attention. This idea applies to much more than business. Think about your personal life. How many repetitive decisions do you make every day? What should I wear? What should I eat? Exercise. Which bills need paying? Where are my important documents? Every tiny decision consumes mental energy. Successful people often simplify these repeated choices. Not because they're lazy, because they understand something psychologists have studied for years. Decision fatigue. Your brain has a limited amount of high-quality attention every day. Every unnecessary decision quietly drains it. Imagine waking up and already knowing your morning routine. Your workout schedule is fixed. Healthy meals are planned. Bills are paid automatically. Important reminders appear exactly when needed. Your workspace is organized. Suddenly your mind becomes available for bigger challenges. Instead of spending energy remembering small things, you spend it creating meaningful things. Automation isn't about replacing thinking. It's about protecting thinking. One fascinating example comes from creative professionals. Many successful writers don't wait for inspiration. They create systems. They write at the same time every day. They remove distractions. They prepare their workspace the night before. Eventually the habit becomes automatic. Their creativity isn't left to chance. It's supported by routine. The same principle applies to almost every area of life. Systems beat willpower. Willpower disappears when you're tired. Good systems continue working even on difficult days. Imagine two students preparing for an important exam. The first student depends entirely on motivation. Some days they study for 8 hours. Other days they don't study at all. Their progress depends on how inspired they feel. The second student studies 2 focused hours every day, regardless of mood. Which student is more likely to succeed? Usually, the second one. Consistency quietly defeats intensity. Small actions repeated for months often outperform huge bursts of effort followed by long periods of inactivity. Tim encourages readers to think like architects instead of laborers. A laborer builds with physical effort. An architect builds systems that others can follow. One scales through hard work. The other scales through intelligent design. This doesn't mean everyone should immediately quit their job and start a company. Far from it. In fact, one of the smartest ideas in the book is to begin small. Build something alongside your existing responsibilities. Test ideas before making huge commitments. Many people dream about entrepreneurship but never begin because they believe they need a revolutionary invention. Tim disagrees. You don't always need to invent something completely new. Often, success comes from solving an existing problem more effectively. Look around you. Every successful business exists because it solves a problem. Restaurants solve hunger. Streaming platforms solve entertainment. Educational platforms solve learning. Delivery services solve convenience. Health apps solve fitness tracking. The question isn't, what can I invent? It's, what problem can I solve better? This shift makes entrepreneurship much less intimidating. You don't have to change the world overnight. You simply have to create value for a specific group of people. Here's another mistake many aspiring entrepreneurs make. They fall in love with their product, instead of falling in love with the customer's problem. Imagine spending an entire year creating the perfect app. Beautiful design, amazing features, elegant interface, then discovering nobody actually needed it. Months of effort disappear because the creator asked the wrong question. The better approach is surprisingly simple. First, understand what people genuinely struggle with. Then build something that makes their lives easier. Successful businesses rarely begin with brilliant ideas. They begin with genuine curiosity. What frustrates people? What wastes their time? What feels unnecessarily complicated? Every frustration hides an opportunity. Think about some of the world's most successful companies. Many didn't invent completely new industries. They simply removed friction. Ordering food became easier. Booking accommodation became easier. Sending money became easier. Learning became easier. People willingly pay for convenience. They willingly pay for saved time. They willingly pay for reduced stress. Tim repeatedly reminds us that your goal isn't to become the busiest entrepreneur. It's to build something that serves people while giving you greater freedom, not less. That's why he emphasizes testing before expanding. Imagine opening an enormous restaurant without knowing whether anyone likes your food. Sounds risky, doesn't it? Yet people do something similar all the time. They spend years developing products before asking whether customers actually want them. A smarter approach is to create a small version first. Gather feedback. Improve. Adjust. Grow gradually. Failure becomes less expensive. Learning becomes much faster. Every successful company you've ever admired went through countless improvements before becoming successful. The first version is rarely perfect. The important thing is beginning. Because action teaches lessons that planning never can. Another important lesson Tim shares is about delegation. Many people proudly say, "If I want something done properly, I'll do it myself." At first, this sounds responsible. But imagine a conductor trying to play every instrument in an orchestra. The piano, the violin, the drums, the trumpet, the flute. It would be impossible. Leadership isn't about doing everything. It's about making sure everything gets done. The same applies whether you're running a company, leading a project, or simply organizing your own life. Delegation isn't admitting weakness, it's multiplying effectiveness. Of course, not every task should be delegated. Some work requires your personal attention, your creativity, your judgment, your relationships, but repetitive administrative work, scheduling, basic research, routine organization, many of these tasks can be handled by systems or by other capable people. Every hour spent on low-value activities is an hour unavailable for high-value thinking. And that brings us to perhaps the greatest misconception about freedom. People imagine freedom means doing absolutely nothing. In reality, freedom means choosing what deserves your attention. You still work, you still create, you still solve problems, but now your energy is invested where it matters most. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. That single difference transforms work from a burden into something far more meaningful. And once you've learned to define your priorities, eliminate distractions, and automate repetitive work, one final question remains. What would your life actually look like if you were no longer tied to a single office, a single city, or a fixed schedule? Because the greatest reward isn't simply earning more money. It's reclaiming the freedom to decide how your own story unfolds. Imagine waking up tomorrow with complete control over your schedule. No alarm dragging you out of bed before sunrise. No rush hour traffic. No endless queue of meetings. No feeling that someone else owns your time. Would you sleep until noon? Maybe for a few days. Would you watch movies all day? Perhaps for a weekend. But eventually something interesting would happen. You would begin searching for purpose. This is where many people misunderstand the idea of freedom. Freedom is not the absence of work. Freedom is the ability to choose work that matters. Humans are not designed to remain idle forever. We are naturally curious. We enjoy solving problems. We like learning. We want to create. The real problem isn't work itself. The problem is meaningless work. Work that drains your energy without giving you fulfillment. Work that feels disconnected from your values. Work that consumes your best years while promising that happiness will arrive later. Tim Ferriss believes there is a better alternative. Instead of postponing your dreams until retirement, begin living parts of them today. He calls this idea mini retirements. Most people imagine retirement as one long vacation waiting at the end of 40 or 50 years of work. But think about how strange that idea really is. Imagine someone telling you, work continuously from the age of 25 until 65. Ignore your desire to travel. Ignore your curiosity. Ignore your passion projects. Ignore your health. Then, if everything goes according to plan, you'll finally have enough time to enjoy life. Sounds risky, doesn't it? Because life offers no guarantees. Nobody knows what tomorrow holds. Health changes. Economies change. Circumstances change. Waiting decades before truly living assumes that everything will happen exactly as planned. Reality rarely follows perfect plans. Many retirements challenge this traditional model. Instead of saving every memorable experience for old age, spread meaningful adventures throughout your life. Maybe it's spending a month learning photography in another city. Maybe it's taking 6 weeks to volunteer for a cause you care about. Maybe it's learning scuba diving. Maybe it's writing your first novel. Maybe it's traveling through places you've always dreamed of visiting. These experiences don't interrupt life. They become life. Interestingly, people often argue that they simply can't afford such experiences. But Tim encourages readers to look deeper. Sometimes the issue isn't income. It's priorities. Think about the average person spending over 5 years. Daily coffee. Frequent food delivery. Subscriptions rarely used. Impulse purchases. Expensive gadgets replaced every cup. Luxury items bought mainly to impress others. Individually, these expenses seem insignificant. Together, they often equal the cost of life-changing experiences. This isn't an argument against enjoying money. It's about spending intentionally. Every purchase silently answers a question. What kind of life am I building? Money spent on status often creates temporary satisfaction. Money invested in meaningful experiences creates stories, memories, confidence, friendships, and personal growth that remain long after the money is gone. Think back to the happiest conversation you've ever had with an older person. Did they proudly describe the television they bought 20 years ago? Probably not. They talked about the places they visited, the challenges they overcame, the people they met, the risks they took, the lessons they learned. Life is remembered through experiences, not receipts. Another fascinating lesson from the book is that uncertainty is not your enemy. It's actually one of the greatest sources of excitement. Imagine reading a novel where you already know every chapter before opening the first page. Would you continue reading? Probably not. The mystery is what keeps us turning the pages. Life works the same way. Many people spend enormous energy trying to eliminate every uncertainty. They want guaranteed success, guaranteed profits, guaranteed careers, guaranteed outcomes. But growth has always existed outside certainty. Every entrepreneur enters uncertainty. Every scientist experiments with uncertainty. Every explorer embraces uncertainty. Every artist creates without knowing exactly how people will respond. The unknown isn't a sign to stop. It's often a sign that you're about to learn something valuable. Fear, however, convinces us otherwise. Fear has an interesting habit. It magnifies imaginary disasters while shrinking possible rewards. Suppose you're thinking about asking for a promotion. Your mind immediately creates dozens of frightening possibilities. What if my manager says no? What if they think I'm arrogant? What if this changes how they see me? But have you ever noticed how rarely your imagination creates equally detailed positive scenarios? What if they appreciate my confidence? What if they immediately agree? What if this conversation changes my career forever? Our brains naturally protect us from danger. Unfortunately, they sometimes protect us from opportunity as well. That's why courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. Another powerful idea Tim shares is that discomfort often points toward growth. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. At first, every movement feels awkward. You wobble, you fall, you lose balance. If you judged your future based only on those first attempts, you'd probably conclude that cycling wasn't meant for you. But after enough practice, what once felt impossible becomes automatic. Every meaningful skill follows this pattern. Public speaking, writing, programming, investing, leading people, building a business, learning a language. The beginning is almost always uncomfortable. The mistake many people make is assuming discomfort means they're on the wrong path. Often it means they're finally moving. Comfort creates familiarity. Challenge creates transformation. Tim repeatedly reminds readers that extraordinary lives aren't built by avoiding discomfort. They're built by choosing worthwhile discomfort. The temporary discomfort of learning eventually replaces the permanent discomfort of regret. And regret has a strange way of becoming heavier every year. Imagine meeting two versions of yourself 20 years from now. The first version took thoughtful risks. Some worked brilliantly, some failed, but every experience taught valuable lessons. This person carries wisdom, confidence, and unforgettable memories. The second version chose safety every single time. No embarrassing failures, no major risks, no significant adventures. Life remained predictable, but deep inside exists one painful question. What if I had tried? Which future feels heavier? Most people fear failure. Very few realize how deeply regret can shape an entire lifetime. This doesn't mean making reckless decisions. The book never suggests abandoning responsibility or acting impulsively. Instead, it encourages calculated experiments. Small risks, small tests, small improvements. Imagine trying to improve just 1% every day. One better decision, one unnecessary distraction removed, one useful habit added, one meaningful conversation started, one valuable page read. These tiny improvements appear insignificant, but over months and years they quietly reshape your identity. Success is rarely created by one dramatic breakthrough. It's usually built through thousands of ordinary decisions repeated consistently. The same is true for freedom. Freedom doesn't suddenly arrive one morning. It grows. Every automated system, every valuable skill learned, every intentional financial decision, every distraction eliminated, every meaningful relationship strengthened, every courageous conversation, each one adds another small piece to a life designed with purpose instead of accident. Perhaps that's the biggest lesson hidden inside this book. Your future isn't created by one extraordinary day. It's created by the ordinary days you repeat over and over again. Every morning you choose your habits. Eventually those habits choose your future. Most people underestimate the power of small daily choices because their results are invisible at first. Miss one workout. Nothing changes. Waste one evening scrolling endlessly. Nothing changes. Postpone one important goal. Nothing changes. But repeat those choices for years. And suddenly everything changes. Fortunately, the opposite is equally true. Read 10 pages every day. Exercise consistently. Protect your attention. Spend intentionally. Build valuable skills. Create instead of only consuming. After a few years, people may call your success extraordinary. They won't see the thousands of quiet decisions that created it. Tim's philosophy isn't about escaping work. It's about escaping unconscious living. Instead of allowing society to write your story, begin writing it yourself. Choose your priorities before the world chooses them for you. Design your schedule before someone else fills it. Build your freedom before comfort convinces you to postpone it. Because one day, whether we realize it or not, all of us spend the final currency we can never earn back. Time. And unlike money, every second spent is gone forever. So the real question isn't whether you can afford to pursue a life with greater freedom. The real question is whether you can afford not to. Now let's pause for a moment and ask a question that almost nobody asks. If freedom is the goal, then why do so many people who become financially successful still feel trapped? Think about some of the most successful professionals you've ever met. Many earn impressive incomes. They own beautiful homes, drive luxury cars, travel in business class, yet when you speak to them, one sentence appears again and again. I'm just too busy. Some haven't taken a real vacation in years. Some constantly check emails during family dinners. Some can't remember the last weekend they spent without thinking about work. From the outside, they've won. On the inside, many still feel imprisoned. This reveals one of the deepest lessons in the 4-hour workweek. Money without freedom is simply a more comfortable cage. The goal isn't to become rich at the cost of your life. The goal is to build a life rich enough that money becomes a tool, not a master. Unfortunately, modern society often encourages the opposite. We're constantly comparing ourselves with everyone else. Someone buys a bigger house. We suddenly want one too. A friend purchases a luxury car. Now our perfectly functional car seems inadequate. Someone announces a promotion on social media. Suddenly we question our own progress. Comparison quietly steals contentment. And the dangerous part is that comparison never ends. No matter how successful you become, someone will always appear richer, smarter, younger, stronger, or more accomplished. If your happiness depends on outperforming everyone else, you'll spend your entire life chasing a finish line that keeps moving farther away. Tim encourages a different mindset. Instead of competing with others, compete with the person you were yesterday. Ask yourself questions like, did I learn something valuable today? Did I move closer to my goals? Did I spend my time intentionally? Did I become slightly wiser than I was last week? Those are comparisons you can actually control. And control is one of the foundations of lasting confidence. Another fascinating idea from the book is that many people accidentally become prisoners of their own success. Imagine someone receives a major salary increase. Naturally, they celebrate. They upgrade to a larger apartment, purchase a more expensive vehicle, increase monthly expenses, adopt a more luxurious lifestyle. Everything feels exciting, but something unexpected happens. Now they must continue earning that higher income just to maintain their new lifestyle. Their financial freedom hasn't increased. Their financial obligations have. It's almost like climbing onto a faster treadmill. You're moving faster, but you're still running. This phenomenon is sometimes called lifestyle inflation. The more you earn, the more you spend. And because expenses grow alongside income, financial freedom remains just out of reach. Tim suggests a surprisingly different approach. Instead of immediately increasing your lifestyle every time your income grows, increase your freedom. Use additional income to reduce debt. Build investments. Create emergency savings. Develop income-producing assets. Acquire valuable skills. Invest in systems that reduce future stress. In other words, purchase options instead of appearances. Because options create freedom, appearances often create pressure. Imagine receiving a significant bonus at work. One option is spending it on the newest luxury gadget. Another option is investing it in learning a skill that could increase your future income for years. Both purchases provide satisfaction, but one disappears quickly. The other continues paying dividends long after the excitement fades. This mindset separates consumers from creators. Consumers ask, "What can I buy?" Creators ask, "What can I build?" Consumers exchange money for products. Creators exchange ideas for value. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but only one consistently increases long-term freedom. This brings us to another essential lesson. Never stop learning. The world changes faster today than at any other time in history. Entire industries appear almost overnight. Others disappear just as quickly. Technology evolves. Markets evolve. Customer needs evolve. The people who continue learning remain valuable regardless of economic conditions. Think about someone who learned programming 20 years ago but never updated their knowledge. Compare them with someone who keeps learning new technologies every year. Who is more adaptable? Who has more opportunities? The answer is obvious. The same applies to every profession. Doctors continue studying. Engineers continue learning. Designers adapt to new tools. Business owners adjust to changing markets. Growth isn't something you finish. It's something you practice. The most successful people often share one habit. They remain students no matter how accomplished they become. Curiosity becomes their competitive advantage. Instead of saying, "I already know enough," they ask, "What don't I know yet?" That single question has built countless successful careers. Another important habit Tim encourages is regularly stepping away from your routine. This may sound strange. Why would leaving work make you better at work? Because distance creates perspective. Imagine staring at a painting from only 2 inches away. You'd notice every tiny brushstroke, but you'd completely miss the picture itself. Life works exactly the same way. When you're constantly busy, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture. Taking breaks isn't escaping responsibility. It's creating space for better decisions. Some of humanity's greatest ideas appeared during walks, vacations, showers, quiet mornings, long conversations, moments when the mind finally had room to think. Constant busyness suffocates creativity. Silence often awakens it. That's why protecting moments of reflection is just as important as protecting moments of productivity. Ask yourself occasionally, am I climbing the right mountain? Is my work moving me toward the life I actually want? If nothing changed for the next 5 years, would I be proud of where this path leads? These questions may feel uncomfortable, but uncomfortable questions often create extraordinary lives. Comfortable questions usually create ordinary ones. As this journey through the 4-hour workweek comes to an end, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This book isn't really about working 4 hours a week. It's about reclaiming ownership of your life. It's about refusing to believe that exhaustion is the price of success. It's about understanding that productivity isn't measured by hours but by meaningful results. It's about designing your days intentionally instead of living them by default. Perhaps the greatest lesson Tim Ferriss leaves us with is this: don't wait until someday to begin living. Don't postpone happiness until retirement. Don't assume freedom is something reserved for the wealthy or the lucky. Every meaningful life is designed one decision at a time, one habit at a time, one courageous step at a time. You don't have to transform everything overnight. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow. You don't need millions of dollars before making changes. Start where you are. Remove one unnecessary distraction. Learn one valuable skill. Create one additional source of income. Protect one extra hour of your day. Read one more chapter. Take one calculated risk. Have one important conversation you've been avoiding. Small changes repeated consistently create extraordinary outcomes. Years from now, You probably won't remember the emails you answered in a hurry. You won't remember another ordinary Tuesday at the office. But you'll remember the moments when you chose courage over comfort. You'll remember the journey you finally took. The business you finally started. The book you finally wrote. The skill you finally mastered. The memories you finally created. Because at the end of life, people rarely regret working one extra hour. They regret the dreams they kept postponing. So as you close this chapter, don't ask yourself how to become busier. Ask yourself how to become freer. Not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, creatively. Because true wealth isn't measured by the number in your bank account. It's measured by how much control you have over your own time, your own choices, and ultimately, your own life. If today's journey gave you a new perspective, then don't let these ideas remain just inspiration. Choose one lesson from this book and put it into action today. Even the smallest step can begin a completely different future. Thank you for spending your time with Volume and Vision. If you enjoy thoughtful book summaries that help you grow smarter, think deeper, and live more intentionally, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for more life-changing books every week. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, your greatest investment will always be the life you choose to build.